Hi friends, Mickey Mankus here and welcome to Out the Back Door. Today I want to share a recipe with you for a 1930s banana bread. If you didn't know, banana bread got its start in the 1930s during the Great Depression. The Great Depression started in 1928 in the United States, but it continued through the 30s. And times were really tough, desperate. People didn't have the food that they needed. Let's back up a little bit and talk about bananas. Bananas were kind of a luxury and they would come over on the ships, but they didn't store very well. So by the time the consumer actually did get to buy a banana, which they were enjoying, they'd either have to eat it immediately or make do with it. They weren't going to toss it out. They didn't waste any food whatsoever. Another thing that sparked the banana bread era, the big companies that were producing the baking soda and baking powder, they introduced this as a leavening agent for the household consumer. And that way, that was the start of quick breads. You didn't have to worry about putting yeast in your bread, and this was a lot faster to make. So that's kind of a little bit of a background on the banana bread and how it became. Right now in 2021 and last year 2020, because of the pandemic, we have been going through some very hard times. Many people lost their jobs, businesses have closed down and everything because of the pandemic. So I found this great little book here online about stories and recipes from the Depression, and then there's some modern ones in there also. So I was kind of looking and researching. It's like, where did the banana bread first start from? What kind of recipes were they using? What foods did they have on hand in order to use? So I'm going to make that banana bread for you. This is what I want to mention. Don't waste any food and throw it out. All right. Now the bananas that are on the bottom here are very dark, and the reason they were is because I put them into the refrigerator when they started getting soft. And by making them cold like that, the outside skins really did get dark quickly. Same with these. I had just thrown these in the refrigerator yesterday, and I have one here that's starting to go also. So it was like, I need to make banana bread. Being I have as many bananas as I have that need to be used up in the banana bread, I'm tripling the recipe today. I will give you the amounts for a single batch that would make 2 loaf pans. Okay, the first thing I need to start with is 1.5 cups of sugar. I'm not going to be using an electric mixer. Even if somebody did have an electric mixer back in the 30s, that was probably a luxury to them. So I'm just going to do this all by hand with the regular hand kitchen tools that I do have. All right, to my sugar, I'm going to be adding 3 sticks of butter. These are 1/2 cup. And as I said, as long as I'm not using an electric mixer, it's going to take a little bit more to cream these. One tool that I have found that it works easier if I'm going to kind of start creaming it together is like a pastry dough cutter. And I'm just going to cut the butter into my sugar to make smaller pieces to begin with. To me, when you're making things from scratch and you're not using anything electric, it gives you more of an appreciation for your end product. Some of the bananas, the really dark ones, were actually darker when I peeled them, but I did taste one and they're fine. They're extremely sweet, but the flavor is still a good banana. It's not like fermenting, so I did use them all. Okay, I'm starting to get to the consistency where I'm going to be able to just use a spoon now. Okay, the next thing we're going to need are eggs. The recipe calls for 2 eggs. I'm going to need 6. Okay, let's go back to the Depression era. I am going to be using my water-glassed eggs. I can't afford to go to the store and buy eggs right now, and I did put some up from the chickens. The chickens aren't laying eggs right now, so that's what I'm going to be using. Okay, go ahead and use regular eggs from the store. I'm going to pull 6 of these out. I'm going to get them washed, and then I'll be right back. If you didn't see my video on water glassing eggs, I'll leave a link above so that you can preserve them for a long shelf life. In fact, I'm using eggs that are over 15 months old right now, and they're fine. I do crack my eggs in a separate bowl one at a time just to make sure. And like this one, one thing I did notice with the water glass eggs, when they get really old, the yolks seem to break down more and they'll come apart, but they're excellent for baking with. Also, do not throw your eggshells away, especially if you're a gardener. What I do is I actually put them in a different little container and I set them aside and I let them dry out and I crush them down. I use these when I'm planting my tomatoes and my peppers. Excellent. I'm just going to keep dumping my eggs into here, and like I said, you only need 2 eggs for this recipe. And I'm going to continue this and we'll get to the next step. I'm just mixing up my eggs right now before I go and I dump it into my batter that I've got going right now. And we'll pour those in. And then mix this in. Okay, right now it's liquidy enough that I can actually use my wire whip. Next thing it calls for is buttermilk. You're going to put a 1/2 cup of buttermilk in. Well, guess what? I don't have any buttermilk right now. And I don't have any milk right now. And I don't have the money to go to the store for it. But I did make yogurt not very long ago. If you didn't see when I made Greek yogurt, this is the byproduct that I had gotten when I went and strained the yogurt to make it thick. So it was a Greek yogurt. This is my way. This is the same thing as using the buttermilk. So in the Depression time, you use everything that you have. So the recipe calls for a 1/2 cup. I'm going to need 1½ cups. And pour that in. And yes, you can use buttermilk. You don't have to use whey. You can use regular milk also if you want. Okay, the next step I'm going to take is I'm going to be putting in my vanilla extract. Maybe during that time you're not able to afford vanilla extract and they have imitation vanilla. You're going to need 1 teaspoon. Maybe you make your own vanilla extract. I do. I just keep it in a smaller bottle here that I've repurposed. Okay, so we've got our vanilla in. I'm going to mix that up. Okay, you're going to need salt. I'm using sea salt, but I realized they didn't have sea salt then. You need 1 teaspoon of salt. Now I know it looks like I'm using a lot. Remember, I'm tripling the recipe. So 1 teaspoon of salt. Baking soda. This is our leavening agent that they just came out with. You need 1 teaspoon of that also. And I'm going to whisk that in. By the way, I preheated my oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, now I'm going to add my flour. I'm using an all-purpose flour. If you have whole wheat and want to use that, that's fine. I'm not going to sift it, but I don't want to just dig out of my jar either. 2 cups of flour, and as usual, I'm making a mess. All right, I'm just going to continue to mix in my flour into the batter. Now, some people had a little bit of extra money and they actually had nuts. And so they would add nuts to their bread. Some of the quick breads were just nut breads. They didn't have the bananas in it. But make sure that you mix it so it's well incorporated, so you don't have any lumps of flour once it's baked and you cut into it. That's just not appealing when you have little globs of flour when you cut into your loaf of bread. Okay, oh, that looks good. It smells good. I am going to add nuts to it, and I'm using my little vintage nut grinder. If you do want to put nuts into the recipe, half a cup of nuts is what's called for. If you like lots of nuts, that's totally up to you. So I'm opening up a jar of walnuts from 2017. This is where I do a lot of my vacuum canning to preserve foods, my dried foods, for a longer shelf life. You can chop these up with a knife or the food processor if you need to. My mama had one of these little nut grinders when I was young growing up. And when she would be baking and she'd have to grind nuts, it was like, Mama, can I grind the nuts? I mean, we thought that was a big deal. We had fun doing that. So the only thing about this is you can't put a large amount of nuts in the hopper at one time. Just unscrew the top. I'm gonna dump those in. All right, nuts are all ready to go. And now I'm just going to mix those into the batter. All right, now I want to get my pans ready. What I'm going to be using is my cast iron loaf pans. I was looking at it, it's like I do need to re-season them. So I'll be doing a video soon on how to season your cast iron. As I mentioned before, this will do 2 loaves of banana bread. And so I've got my 6 loaves out here. You can spray these down with like Pam spray if you want. You can use shortening, coconut oil. I'm going to use butter to grease my pans. And you want to do the bottoms and the sides. Okay, all the pans are greased up and ready to go, and now I'm going to put my batter in. I'm just going to use one of my measuring cups to kind of like get equal amounts into each one. I've got my batter into my loaf pans evenly distributed. I'm going to get them into the oven, like I said, at 350 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm going to bake this for 1 hour. All right, all the banana bread is cooled. I was able to take them out of the pans, and I'm going to let them sit on the cooling rack for a little bit yet. I did slice into one already. I wanted you to see how delicious this looks. This is your 1930s banana bread. So if you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, give me a thumbs up, and if you have any comments or questions, please leave them below. And until next time, I hope you have a wonderful day. God bless.